Now, there are over 50,000 Londoners enjoying free travel on our transport networks for no other reason that they are related to someone who works for Transport for London. The Conservative mayoral candidate, Sean Bailey, says it costs us £44 million every year and that money could be spent elsewhere. Our political correspondent, Simon Harris, is at Russell Square Station for us tonight. So, Simon, is he right?
Well, Lucrezia, there's no dispute over how many people enjoy the perk, but there is a row over whether it actually costs anything. Anyone who works for Transport for London or one of the bus companies is entitled to 2 free travel passes, one for themselves and one for someone else who lives at the same address. This is one of them. They're called nominee passes, and there are 52,000 of them. Boris Johnson didn't have a problem with the perk when he was the mayor, and nor does Sadiq Khan. But Mr Khan's Conservative rival in May's mayoral election, Sean Bailey, certainly does.
Mr Mayor, your budget has provision to pay for TfL nominee passes. We calculate at least £44 million. Why was this money not directed to crime reduction?
Firstly, there is no monies. It's not that leaves TfL's budget to go towards nominee passes, so it's a misunderstanding of the way budgets work.
The point is a loss in revenue, isn't it? Monies that would be coming to the GLA, to TfL.
The mayor argued that if the passes were scrapped, TfL workers would simply demand higher salaries. And as for spending the money on tackling crime, the mayor has his own plan to increase spending by £110 million next year as a result of putting up the council tax.
All right, Simon, thank you. Good evening. Network Rail promises better access, wider platforms, more lifts, escalators and facilities when the £150 million upgrade to the station at Gatwick Airport is complete. But the cost of that is disruption for 2 years on one of London's busiest commuter lines, with platform closures and fewer trains. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the details.
Gatwick is the first airport in the world with road, rail and air transport in one unit. It's only 35 minutes to Victoria.
60 years ago, an airport with its own station was a novelty. But in 2020, Gatwick Station is firmly stuck in the past.
It's too many people being bumped in too many cases. It just isn't big enough.
More staff, first of all, more staff.
It is quite difficult, and you have to leave a lot of extra time if you're going to jump on a train.
The answer is a £150 million makeover, but it comes at a cost for commuters on the busy Brighton line. On May the 17th, a 2-year temporary timetable will be introduced, alongside a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit and temporary platform closures. There'll be a knock-on effect on the Gatwick Express, 50% fewer trains off-peak, meaning 2 instead of 4 an hour. And on Southern, there'll be no off-peak trains running all the way from Victoria to Brighton. These complex changes to the timetable won't just be a challenge to passengers. The company which runs the trains will also be under pressure because it has an unfortunate track record.
We are sorry to announce that the 10:54 Thameslink service to Brighton has been cancelled.
In May 2018, Thameslink and Great Northern trains went into meltdown when a new timetable was introduced by the parent company, which also owns Gatwick Express and Southern.
This is not on the scale of the change that we saw back in May 18, but we have to make these changes for this airport station in order to improve accessibility, reduce overcrowding and improve the reliability of our train service over this very busy area of our network.
The prize is a 21st century station with more room, more lifts, more escalators and wider platforms. But that's more than 2 years down the line, and getting there might not be a smooth journey. Simon Harris, ITV News.
So Simon, what can passengers expect then?
Well, for a start, longer journeys. For many of them, some commuters will discover that their usual trains no longer exist. Others who are used to going on through trains will find themselves having to change trains at places like East Croydon and Haywards Heath. GTR, the parent company, says that longer trains should ease overcrowding, and some Southern passengers will be able to use the more expensive Gatwick Express trains without paying extra, but not all of them, so that could cause confusion. At the end of all this, of course, there will be a sparkling new station at Gatwick, great for airport users, but no obvious great benefits for commuters on the Brighton line. And it's not the end of the disruption. A few more years beyond this temporary timetable, there's a major engineering project planned to ease a bottleneck at East Croydon and almost certainly the return of those dreaded words, temporary timetable.
Yeah. I wouldn't like the sound of them. Simon, thank you. Good evening. As more cases of the coronavirus are confirmed in Europe, there are fears tonight and confusion over the possible impact here. In Harlow, one school kept its doors shut today. It's after a teacher at the school returned from northern Italy, where the virus is spreading rapidly. Meanwhile, at Canary Wharf, hundreds of staff were told to stay at home today. But the Health Secretary said this afternoon there was no need for any schools to shut while people are being tested. And London's mayor said this city is well prepared. With the latest, here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
The only classroom activity at this school today was cleaning. Pupils at William Martin Junior and Infant in Harlow got a day off after a teacher came back from Italy. The teacher isn't ill, but a deep clean was ordered as a precaution. According to the government, the risk of anyone catching coronavirus here is still low. That hasn't stopped different schools, different organisations interpreting the advice in different ways. There is clearly some confusion. In Sidcup, Cleve Park schools stayed open, even though some pupils were said to be at home in isolation after feeling unwell at the end of an Italian ski trip. Parents on the school run agreed with the decision.
Hopefully it will be clear that these kids who came from ski trip hasn't got it.
My children all know to wash their hands regularly, kind of thing, be careful what they touch.
They have to go to school. They're doing their mocks this week, so, I'm just going to take advice from the school, really.
Another group of skiers from Sydney Russell School in Dagenham, also just back from Italy, were told to stay at home for the next 48 hours as a precaution. In the Commons, the Health Secretary set out to clear up any misunderstanding.
If anyone has been in contact with a suspected case in a childcare or an educational setting, no special measures are required while test results are awaited. There is no need to close the school or send other students or staff home.
Mr Hancock said more than 7,000 Britons had been tested for coronavirus. Diego Gullo isn't one of them, although he'd like to be. He's just back from northern Italy and is in self-isolation at home in North London.
As you can see right now, I'm actually keeping the kids away, so if I come down, I ask them to move back to their room.
Are you surprised you can't get tested?
I am a bit puzzled. I understand it might be very expensive and difficult to carry all these tests, but at the same time, I don't want to put either myself or anyone else into a risky position.
The mayor, on a school visit in Shoreditch, again repeated his message. There was no cause for alarm.
We are preparing, we are practicing for the potential of the virus spreading, but I don't want to alarm anybody. Nobody should be panicked or alarmed, but you'll have seen, you mentioned the school in Sidcup, you'll have seen across the country, for example, those children who have returned from skiing holidays in northern Italy, what steps the schools are taking. Those are sensible precautions to take.
It wasn't just schools. At Canary Wharf, the American energy firm Chevron sent home 300 people after one employee said they had a flu-like illness. Simon Harris, ITV News.
Good evening. After 17 years of planning a third runway, serious doubts today that one will ever be built. Heathrow Airport bosses have always said it's vital for London so that we can continue being a major hub in Europe. They say it's crucial too for business. But at the Court of Appeal, judges agreed with councils and campaigners that environmental needs were not considered as they should have been. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who once threatened to lie down in front of the bulldozers, will not be appealing the decision. Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
The jets were screaming over the rooftops as normal today, but for the first time in many years, Heathrow's unhappy neighbours had reason to celebrate. Justine Bailey lives in Harmondsworth. Before today's court case, she was expecting to leave her home of more than 25 years.
If it really is the end of the road and Heathrow is not going to be able to expand its operations, that means I can go on living here. I bought this house as somewhere to retire to die in 20, 30 years' time.
Harmondsworth is one of 3 villages where homes are due to be bulldozed to make way for the third runway. But the villagers might just have been thrown a lifeline today by the Court of Appeal. 3 judges declared the government's Airports National Policy Statement, or ANPS, unlawful because it didn't respect the Paris Treaty on Climate Change.
The Paris Agreement ought to have been taken into account by the Secretary of State in the preparation of the ANPS, and an explanation given as to how it was taken into account. But it was not.
Climate change campaigners cheered outside the Royal Courts of Justice as the ruling was streamed online.
This is an absolutely astounding victory for climate justice. It's something that Friends of the Earth has been working on as a mission for years.
I think this project is now dead. Boris Johnson, I think, knows that as well. This is a way in which Boris Johnson can get off the hook. Drop the thing now.
Heathrow's plan to expand was overwhelmingly backed by MPs when Parliament voted on it. But that was before Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. 5 years ago, he made this pledge to stop the third runway.
I will lie down with you in front of those bulldozers.
Oh, this government's absolutely committed, Prime Minister Down, to having airport expansion, but we want to make sure that that expansion is environmentally friendly.
The government said it wouldn't challenge the court's decision. Bosses at Heathrow immediately announced they would launch an appeal.
Well, this is not the end of the road. What the court has decided, which is that the government didn't go through the due process in making their decision, is something that is eminently fixable. And in fact, the court has recommended that the government undertakes a review to fix it.
In Harmondsworth, they were trying to decipher the mixed messages from the judges, ministers and the airport. The court told the government to go away and come up with a new plan, a plan which meets the target of a carbon-neutral Britain by 2050. But ministers are effectively washing their hands of Project Heathrow, saying it's now up to the aviation industry to make it work. What are the chances that you'll still be living in this house in 5-10 years' time?
I hope better than they were yesterday.
Tonight, there is much uncertainty about Heathrow's third runway. Opponents hope it's been killed off. Its supporters regard today as a setback, but not terminal. Simon Harris, ITV News, Heathrow Airport.